Okay, so let's start here in Sector Beitzah on 7b on the bottom of the page. So we're talking about covering the blood of the bird or the chaya that you shecht on Yontiv. Uh, whether uh, digging for the sand uh, to cover the blood, whether it overrides the Yontiv, the prohibition of Yontiv. So you're allowed to shecht because you're allowed to make Eichel Nefesh on Yom Tov, but are you allowed to dig for the uh, sand? So in order to be able to cover the blood to fulfill the mitzvah. So the Mishnah said that while we're going to have some explanation over here, but the Mishnah said, Umodim, there's a question, should you shecht if you don't have ready-made sand or shouldn't shecht if you don't have? But the Mishnah said they all agree, Shim Shochat, if after the fact that you did shecht, then sheyachper bedeker v'yichase, you can dig with the shovel and you can cover. So maybe you shouldn't shecht, but if you shecht it, go ahead and dig. That's what the Mishnah said. Go ahead, dig with the shovel and cover the blood with the sand that you dig with the shovel. Oh, what does it mean? So Omar Rabbi Zreika, Omar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Zreika in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, V'hu sheyesh loy deker notes miboidyon. That this is only true if the shovel is stuck in the ground from before Yontif. Meaning that you had in mind before Yontif to use that sand because you have a shovel in there. But if you have just sand over there, you're not allowed to. Why? Because this wasn't prepared from the daytime. So it's muktzah because it's not ready for the use of covering the blood with the sand. So again, he says that the only way you're allowed to use, if you shechted, that you're allowed to use the sand to cover the blood is if the shovel was in the sand from the daytime before Yom Tov. And that the fact the shovel was there, it shows you that this we're going to use this sand, so he's allowed to use it to cover the blood. But the Gemara says, V'akavid kitisha. But in order to, the Gemara assumes that when you have the shovel in the ground, right, what is he going to get from it? He's not going to get sand. He's going to get clunks. He's going to get clunks of earth. How is he going to get these clunks of earth to cover the ground? How is he going to get it to cover? How is he going to get it to cover the blood? He's going to have to grind up. He'd have to take apart the clunks of earth, right? That's called kitisha.
It's
That's
called
called
what?
like grinding, and you're not allowed to grind on Yom Tov. Now Rashi explains. It seems the fact that he tells you that only if it has a shovel in there, that means he doesn't allow you, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of covering the blood with sand, you're not allowed to do a malacha. You're allowed to shech the bird, say, because you're allowed to shech it, shechel nefesh. But you're not allowed to cover the blood if you're doing a malacha. Because that's why he stipulates He says if you shecht it, you can cover it. But it means so. If you're not allowed to do a malacha, what does it help that the shovel is in the earth already, but you're going to have to grind it up later on? You can't do it on Yontif. I think Mara says it's not a problem. It happens to be that the shovel is in loose earth, but you don't have to grind it up. So let's just go through the process the Gemara is thinking over here. Do the Rashi. V'okavet kitisha. V'okavet kitisha. So the Gemara, let Rabbi Yehuda parich. This question is according to Rabbi Yehuda. Because the fact that Rabbi Yehuda only allows the Omar, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, he says, "V'hu sheyesh deker notes." He doesn't just allow you. He doesn't say if you shecht it, you can just cover it, which means he doesn't allow you to go start digging. That means he says only v'hu sheyesh deker notes. So that means alma. So you see. So how come you're allowed to cover it if you shecht it? It's because the time of the masnisin. Why is the reason that the Mishnah allows you to cover it? Is lav mishum de osi esedichis visou ba'afar v'dochi es loisase komalacha. It's not for the reason that the positive command you should cover in earth overrides the prohibition of not to do malacha, which means if it was allowed in order to do the mitzvah of covering the blood, you're allowed to do a malacha on Yontiv, why do we need to stipulate that the shovel is in the ground? Then go and shovel it. It means, why is he only allowing, Rabbi Yehuda explains the Mishnah, that it's only if there's a shovel in the ground, that it means if the shovel wasn't in the ground, you wouldn't be allowed to start digging it. Why? Because there's a mitzvah to cover the blood, but it doesn't override the prohibition of Yontiv. On Yontiv, you're not allowed to do it. So you can't cover the blood by overriding a mitzvah. The Eser Chisoba offer cannot override Loisasa Komalacha of Yontiv. So what is the reason? Why does he allow if it's dug in? Elo mishum de kvar chofer v'oimedu. In this case, he's not digging, so he's not doing a malacha. If the shovel is already in the ground, it's in the earth, it's already dug, and it's not called digging, and you would not be violating the loisasa. Okay, so how could you, though, use it? Because you would still have to grind it. You can't grind it then. So that's what it says. V'okovit kitisha shadayin l'govim mudabokimim. The clunks are still connected. Ve'enam re'uyin likisui. They're not fit to cover Elohim kain koitshon. Only if you grind them up, that's how you're going to cover them. And you're not allowed to grind them. V'koitesh tulda de toichenhu. To grind up, to spread apart those clunks of earth, that is a derivative of grinding. Umalachi, that would be a job, and you can't do it on Yontif. So that's why he's asking, what does it help me that the shovel is already in the earth, so you're not digging on Yontif, which you wouldn't be allowed to, but you're still going to be grinding up the earth. How could you do that? Amar Rabbi Chaim bar Abba bar Ashi Amarav. Says Rabbi Chaim bar Ashi Amarav. Turn the page now to 7-8. So he says, "Ba'ofer tituach." Not such a surprising, not such a surprise, not so difficult. It's talking about that the Sand is totally grinded up. So the shovel is in there. He doesn't have to grind it up anymore. He just takes it from there and he covers the blood with it. Okay. But the Gemara said, but there's another issue. If he's going to pick up the dirt from the ground, he's making a hole. But he's making a hole in the ground. So what's so bad at making a hole in the ground? Rashi explains. He would be liable because he's building. Making a hole in the ground, you're building. Now, you have to excavate before you build. You have to excavate. You have to make place for a building. So anytime you really excavate, you make a hole, in a sense, that's called building. So how could you still use the shovel when you're picking up the shovel? You're making a hole. How could you do that in Yom Tov? He says, no, this is not. When a person digs a hole and he wants the hole, that's called the building. But he doesn't want the hole. What does he want? He wants the sand. He wants the dirt because he wants to cover the blood. That's called a davar she'enei ein tzarich melach she'ein tzarich legufa. If you're doing a job, the job here is what? Building. Building is what? Making a hole. But you're not really making a hole. You don't need the hole. What you want is you want the earth, you want the dirt. He says you're going to be exempt. The Amar Rababa. So Rababa. In this case, there's not going to be any liability because this will be like Rababa said. The Amar Rababa says, HaChoifer Guma b'Shabbos. Ve'enei tzorich elo la'afara. One who digs a hole on Shabbos and all what he needs is the earth. He doesn't want the hole. Potter oleo. He's going to be exempt. He's not going to be chayiv. Because on Shabbos we need a meleches machshavos. It should be a thoughtful work. You have to want to do the job. Over here, he doesn't want the job. He doesn't want the hole. He doesn't want the building. He wants the dirt. That's what he wants. That's not called a melacha. But Rashi explains further. Potter oleo. As the Gemara gives the reasoning in the first parak of Chagiga. The kiv on the einay tzarich elo la'afara v'loy legumo, since he doesn't need the dirt, he doesn't need the sand, he only needs the sand, and he doesn't need the hole. Einay boina, that's not considered building, not v'loy chodesh. It's not even considered to be plowing. Ela mekalkel. But it's called ruining. If he needed the hole or he was plowing it because he wants to seed the place over there, okay, then that would be a thoughtful work. Then it would be a job, and then he would be liable. But in this case, he doesn't doing it. What he's doing it is he's making a hole in the ground over there that he doesn't need. That's called mekalkel. Mekalkel is he's ruining it. V'chol mekalkel in peturim. If you are mekalkel, you're just ruining it, then you're exempt. So in this case, if the shovel is in the ground, that would be okay.
Can't you say,
Yeah.
for Shabbos, this is not muktzah because I plan to use it beforehand for Shabbos. So can someone say, okay, if you want to shech something on Yontif, leave a pile of dirt,
That would be the
and
best.
right, and then you wouldn't have a problem.
That would be best. Correct.
Okay. Okay.
But we're talking about a case that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. That would be the best. Okay. The Mishnah later on says a statement which doesn't really fit the flow. It says the ashes of the stove is considered prepared. Who is talking about ashes? Who is talking about a stove? What does it mean that it's prepared? Who is talking about the ashes of the stove? She means a reason. Because who's talking about it? We wouldn't even talk about it. Frag the Gemara, that's the Gemara's question. Efer kira man dechar shmei. The ashes of the kira, who mentioned the Efer kira? Man dechar shmei. Rashi explains, what's the Gemara's question? Who talked about an oven before? We didn't talk about a stove. We didn't talk about an oven. Who mentioned it? Because because look what he says. He says, She Efer, because the ashes of a stove is considered to be prepared. That's why, because what? The mashma, the yohiv taima lemilsa dil'il. It sounds like he's giving a reason for something that he said before. Amar Rabba, says Rabba, Hochi Kamar. This is what he's saying. The Efer Kira Muchanu. It's not She Efer Kira Muchanu, but the Efer Kira Muchanu. Basically, if you don't have sand to cover the blood, and all what you have, the ashes that's in the bottom of the stove that you were cooking on. Over there, they cooked with wood, and there's leftover wood. That Efer is sufficient, also kosher, to cover up the. Yeah, I'm in the middle of a class right now. So he says that the Efer Kira Muchnu, that the ashes of the stove is considered to be prepared. Meaning that the ashes that were from the fire that you had there, you're allowed to use that to cover the blood because we considered the ashes over there prepared for use for whatever you need. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Says Rabbi Yehuda Marav. That's only Leishanu el Shehusik Merev Yontif. That is only true if it was fired up from before Yom Tov. So already, me'esmol daita ilove l'chol mila. If you burnt it, you use the stove and the ashes is there from before Yom Tov, so you already have in mind anything you're going to want to use. Ashes on the bottom of the stove, of the kira, from the day before, whatever I'm going to need to use it, I'm going to use it. Aval husak b'Yom Tov. But if it was not by Yom Tov, if it was fired up on Yom Tov, then it's asur. Then it's prohibited. On Yom Tov, why? Because before Yom Tov, it wasn't ashes yet. You can't say you had in mind from before Yom Tov to use those ashes. There were no ashes in existence. It only became ashes on Yom Tov because you cooked on Yom Tov and you got ashes there. You can't say that you had in mind on those ashes from before Yontiv. Also, then it's also. However, the roi litzlis boy Beitzah. If there's ashes in there which still have from the fire enough heat that if you want to put an egg cooks very quickly. To roast an egg, there's enough heat over there to roast an egg. Which means in Roy Listlos by Beitzah Sheyesh Adain Remetz Cham, there is still hot coals there. Then it's mutter. Why? Explains the Rashi. Why is it mutter? Because the me'esmo be'oidam eitzim, because to use them as heating, as burning, that is from before Yom Tov, when they were still wood, they were prepared. Why this wood was there prepared to fire up there, to cook and to roast. It's still, right now, you can still cook on this wood that was there before, can still be used to cook because you can roast an egg on it. So basically, you're allowed to take that ashes that are there, the hot ashes that are still hot, that you can roast, you can still use it to cook an egg on it. Since it's fit that you can turn around a little bit in order because you want to get the egg roasted. So then you can take it and put it on the blood. Because since it's movable to you, you're allowed to move it, then you can take it and you can well put it on the blood. So he says that you only need it if it's totally cooled down. It has to be from the day before. But this is considered prepared because it's prepared for cooking and it's still cooking. And once you can move it for cooking, you can go ahead and use it to cover the blood. Tanya Nami Hochi. And this is actually corroborated by the Beitzah, because the Beitzah says, Keshamru Efer Kira Muchanu, when they said that the ashes of the Kira is prepared, Le'amru Elo Shahusok Me'erev Yomtiv. They only said in a case in which it was put on fire, that the fire was burned from Erev Yomtiv. Aval Husak b'Yomtiv Osir, but if it was heated up on Yomtiv, then it's prohibited. Ve'im roi litzlois by Beitzah, if it is enough, same as before, enough to roast an egg, then it's mutter because it didn't change its use. It was before wood to cook. It's still cooking the egg. Once you move it, you can move it to cover the blood. Use it for blood. Then the Mishnah, the Gemara says that Hichnis offer liginosei ulechar boisei. If a person brings in sand to his garden or to his chorbosei, which means a place to store it over there, mutar lechasis ba, because as long as it's still a pile, if like you have a pile, so the pile will be used whatever you need it for. Rashi, Hichnis offer harbe b'mokem echad. If he piled up a lot of sand in one place, let's say the ginose for his garden, or let's say the churbase, that means he's trying to build something there. There's a broken down. It's a churba, so he wants to use it, the sand to build cement. I don't know what he wants to do there. L'shoitchon bohem, but and he was going to um, actually, the point was to spread it out. He was trying to make a floor, a layer from the sand, but he hadn't done it yet. He wants to spread it out, but he hadn't done it yet. He created a pile. You know, you order a pile from Palilios or whatever, you order a pile of sand, of stones, and then you're gonna spread it out. He got the sand, he was gonna spread it out. But still, before he spread it out, mutter lechasis boy. He's still allowed to use that to cover the dam, the blood. The koz manshu tzavur daite ilove lechol tzrachav. As long as it's still piled, as long as it's still in a heap, then the person has a mind for it, for all of his needs, that he's going to use it for everything that he needs. As long as it's in the pile, he doesn't think that it's going to be used for only one thing. He's allowed to use it. Of course, once it spreads it out, it's moktzeh. He doesn't have a mind. Rabbi Yehuda, then further says Rabbi Yehuda, Machnis Adam Malay Kupase offer Ba'isa Ba Kol Tzorka. A person could bring in his full bucket with sand, and he does whatever he needs to. Rashi explains what it means. Machnis Adam Malay Kupase offer Bistam. Without any intent, just have a bucket of sand. And he puts it in one place. And then you can do whatever you want. Now, so what's the chiddush here? Why not? So we don't say that it becomes negated, non-important, a little bit of sand, not relative to the whole house, because it's so small, and therefore it's not substantial enough to be considered anything for use, but you can use it for whatever you need. That's okay. Darash Marzutra, and again, remember that those days, most of their floors were made out of dirt. That was the floor. So to put in a bucket of sand, so didn't mean anything. Dorish Marzutra Mishmei the Marzutra Rabba. So Marzutra said the name of the great Marzutra, Vuhu Sheyichad Loi Keren Zovis. That the only time you're allowed to use from that bucket for what you wanted, if you designated a corner for it, so it's a special place. Rashi but you did not you didn't take a bucket full and spread it out. The mukha milsa de litzrachav kaboyilo. Then it's obvious that you need it for your needs. That's why you have the bucket over there. And Rashi qualifies it. It says ubeofer to tuach ka'amar. He's talking about sand that has been soft. It's not lacking. You don't have to dig it. You don't have to grind it up, because that would be other problems. The issue is only preparation. Is it prepared? So this is called prepared. So the Gemara is going to ask a kasha. Misivi, I'll ask you a question. It says in the Beitzah, a koi or a kvi, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. A koi is Rashi says, Sofik chaya, Sofik behema. It's something we're not sure if it's an undomesticated or a domesticated animal. The difference would be with regards to chaylev, with regards to covering the blood on Yontif, because chaya you have to cover the blood on Yontif, but a behema you don't cover the blood. So if you have a koi, which is a questionable chaya and of sofik behemo, ein shechter noise b'yontiv. You're not allowed to shecht on yontiv. Why not? Explains Rashi. Ein shecht noise b'yontiv mishum d'shem chayu v'tzorich kisui, because maybe it's a chaya, maybe it requires covering. And he's not able to like he says, that he can't cover it, that if he did shecht it, you can't cover it. Because why should you go cover the blood? You don't have earth there to cover it with, so don't shecht it because you won't be able to cover it. If you knew that it was a behema, go ahead and shecht it, but you don't have to cover the blood. But since maybe it's a chaya, and maybe you have to cover the blood, and you don't have earth to cover, so don't shecht it. Yim shachte, and if you did shecht it, ein mechasin es dama, you don't cover the blood. Why not? Ein mechasin the shema behemahu, because why can't you cover the blood? Because maybe it's a behema, which doesn't require kisui dam, ve'ein by mitzvahs kisui, and there's no mitzvahs kisui. And therefore, you're not allowed to move the sand for this because it's moksa.
Does kisu adam have any impact on the edibility of the food? Like,
does it impact what, the kashrus?
Yeah.
No, it's a separate mitzvah, but you're not allowed to violate a mitzvah, so don't shecht it. Why can't you cover it? Because it's muktzah. So the Gemara asks, Be'im Isra, and if it's true what you said before, that what, Rashi, the yesh ofor shemuchan l'chol tzorchei odom, that there is sand which person can use, ready sand. Afilu behema l'chasye, alivu behema l'chasye. Why don't you cover it? Rabbi Yehuda said that a person can take in Darish Mishmei. He says, Machnis Odom B'loi Kupos. Rabbi Yehuda says, Offer V'Oisuba Kol Tzorka. You can do everything you want. So why can't he cover it with that? And that's not muktzah b'chlal, because it's prepared for whatever you need. So the Gemara asks, Taimoch, your reasoning, why do you need that? L'kasya be'efer kira. Why doesn't he cover it with the ashes of the oven? Or bedeker notes, or with the shovel that has been in the ground. Why doesn't he use that? What's the answer? It's not available. Taimoch. L'kasya bedeker notes be'efer kira. Rashi switches around the girsa because deker notes was the first thing. Deker notes and the efer kira, they're both written that it's muchanu. Elo, the reason why he doesn't use that, the Leslie, he doesn't have it available. There's no efer kira, there's no deker notes. Achanami the Leslie. So here, he doesn't have this kupa that Rabbi Yehuda was talking about. He doesn't have it available, so that's why he's not using it. Well, you're asking me, he should cover it with that bucket. He doesn't have that bucket there. How is he going to cover it? That's not a question. But the Gemara, so in that case, for the Gemara, my area suffix. So why are you saying that you can't shecht a kuy, this suffix. So the Gemara says, my idea suffix. What? Why do you say you can't shech the kuy? I feel about the namila. Even if it was an absolute, you know that it is a chaya that needs to be covered. You're not allowed to shech. Why? Because that's the halach in the Mishnah. I feel about the namila. Dog besila kaimelon. Because we hold the halacha is like besila. The asri, and they prohibit bafilu the evet below deker notes. Even after the fact, even if you shechted, if you don't have a deker notes, they don't allow besilo. So why is he only saying the halacha is like besilo? Why is he saying mele if you said that there's a because we're not sure, but there is other. But if it was a vada, you could cover it with the decker notes or the kirat is around. Now you're telling me that there's nothing to cover it with. So if there's nothing to cover it with, so then you're not only allowed to not shecht something which is a questionable chaya, even if it's a vada chaya, because the okay besilu kaimel the asri, because the halach is like besilu it's also, but filu the avid below decker notes. If there's no decker notes, they don't allow. And the Gemara answers loy biboyi kama. What he's really saying, it goes without saying. It's not a loy miboykam. Hi the noket koi ain't shechtim. He says you can't shech a koi. Kolshken chay gemura hatuna kisei. Wuneri yochel. Certainly, you're not allowed to shecht a complete, or what's a real chaya, a complete chaya which requires kvisa, and you're not able to. Ulerebusa ashmin and koi. V'loy miboy vadai. He's telling you a novelty that even a koi, and for sure, avade loy miboy vade de loy lishchet. Certainly, avada you don't shech. Abel sofik emo mishum simchas yomtev lishchet v'loy lekasye. But a sofik maybe because of the simchas yomtev, you should shech and not cover up. Because you're not sure that you have to cover it. Maybe you don't. So we know you're not allowed to shech. He doesn't have any means to cover it up. That's the case over here. So avadai, if it's definitely, we know you can't do it because you're not going to end up covering the blood. But maybe.
Don't we say suffix midiraisa?
Yeah.
If it's a suffix midiraisa, then
But it's also an issue that you want to have simchas yantiv. Mashmalon that you're not allowed to do it. Okay, we leave it over here today. I'm actually I didn't do any further, and I have a lot of things lined up. So, Mr. Shem, we'll see everybody next week, same time.
Thank you,
Great
Rabbi.
day, great
Have a
night.
good night.
And we shall continue. Thank you.